For the past few years, we've all gotten pretty used to AI. It's been our creative partner, our chatbot, our content generator. But it turns out that was just the opening act. Because what's happening right now is a fundamental shift. We're moving from an AI that answers us to an AI that acts for us.
So here's how we're going to break this down today. First, we'll talk about the limits of the AI we all know and use. Then, we'll get into what makes these new AI agents so different. After that, we'll look at the crazy economy that's exploding around them, what it all means for our jobs, and finally, we'll take a peek at the truly wild future of where this is all headed. All right, so let's start in a place we're all familiar with, generative AI. The tools that write our emails, draw pictures, and spit out code based on our prompts. They're amazing, they're incredibly powerful, but they're also hitting a ceiling.
And this quote just nails it. These tools are basically mirrors. They're trained on all of our data, our writing styles, our collective ideas. And so the more we use them, the more we start to see the edges of that reflection. The output is slick, sure, but it can also start to feel a little, predictable. This is the one question that is driving the entire industry right now. What happens when an AI can take a big, high-level goal and not just write a memo about it, but actually go out into the digital world and get it done? That is where things get really interesting. Which brings us to the absolute core of what we're talking about today, agentic AI. And look, this isn't just some new feature or a slightly better model. No, this is a completely different way of thinking about what AI is even for. We're talking about a shift from a tool to a teammate.
So what really makes an agent different? It all comes down to one word: autonomy. See, a chatbot just sits there waiting for your next command. An agent, on the other hand, takes your main goal, breaks it down into a logical plan, and then just goes and does it, using whatever tools it needs, searching the web, booking a flight, you name it.
This really puts the difference in sharp relief. We're moving away from this reactive relationship, we prompt, it answers, to a proactive one. We give it a goal, and it comes back when the job is done. The key takeaway here, you don't use an agent like you use a chatbot. You manage it.
Okay, let's make this totally concrete. Say you give it a goal, something like, find and book me the best value trip to Chicago for a 3-day weekend next month. The agent doesn't just give you links. No, it plans out the steps, search flights, compare hotels, look up local events. Then it actually acts on those steps using real-world tools. And here's the magic part. It verifies its own work. Whoops, that flight price just went up, or that hotel is sold out. It adapts its plan on the fly and keeps going until it can hand you the finished itinerary. It's this continuous loop of acting and self-correcting. Now, a massive technological shift like this never happens in a vacuum. It always creates its own economy. And folks, the amount of money pouring into building these autonomous agents is absolutely staggering, which, of course, is starting to raise some pretty big questions about whether it's all sustainable. I mean, to power these agents, you need an insane amount of computing power. And the demand is just off the charts. Broadcom reported a 74% year-over-year jump in AI chip sales. That is not just growth, that is a flat-out gold rush for the silicon that makes this whole new wave of AI even possible. And it's not just the hardware. The value being placed on the human talent, it's astronomical. Just look at this comparison. The average stock compensation at a top lab like OpenAI completely dwarfs what was normal for a giant like Google back in the day. We are in an all-out war for the people who can build and manage these systems. But whenever you see this much hype and this much money moving this fast, the warning signs start to flash. We're already seeing reports that are sparking fears of an AI bubble, and that leads to the crucial question: can the real-world value these agents create actually justify these insane investments? And this brings us to the most personal part of this whole story, the impact on our jobs. I mean, when AI can not only write the report, but also do the research, send the emails, and manage the whole project, what does that mean for us, the human workers? This story is it's both tragic and kind of absurd. And it makes the threat of job displacement feel very, very real. A guy loses his copywriting job to AI, he asks a chatbot for career advice, and its suggestion is, take up tree felling. It really highlights a world where the skills that define your entire career can be automated, like overnight. But it's not just about jobs disappearing entirely. This research, coming from inside a major AI lab, points to a much more subtle risk. As AI takes over more of the tough foundational work, there's a real concern that our own deep expertise could just fade away. So the challenge isn't just about staying employed. It's about how we keep our skills sharp when our tools are this powerful. So, if agentic AI is already automating complex digital jobs, where could this possibly be leading? Well, the answer seems to be that AI is starting to break out of the server and into the physical and even biological worlds. We're starting to see the rise of what people are calling physical intelligence in robotics. DeepMind is working on self-driving science labs that can just run experiments on their own. Companies are using ancients to manage ancient, clunky IT systems that humans can barely handle. But the most futuristic application of all might be in biocomputing. And this is where it gets truly sci-fi. Seriously. Researchers are now figuring out how to use lab-grown clusters of neurons, brain organoids, as a new kind of biological computer. It's a living ecosystem where the system's behavior is guided by neural rhythms. This is the absolute cutting edge, where the line between silicon and a living cell just starts to blur completely. So, as we wrap up here, it's pretty clear the whole paradigm is shifting under our feet. We've gone from using AI as just another clever tool to deploying it as an actual autonomous workforce. And that changes everything. It reframes the whole challenge away from how to write a good prompt to how to be a good manager. The great task of the next decade won't be learning how to use AI, it'll be learning how to lead it.